Welcome to LEWS Podcast and a very warm welcome to the deep dive. This is where we, slice through all the noise, sift through the sources you send us, and really try to pull out what matters. Today, we're plunging into something that, well, it really got people talking. It started as a tremor, but spun into this whole whirlwind of speculation. We're talking about the recent earthquake in Iran, June 20th, 2025. What looked like, a standard geological event. Suddenly there were whispers, no outright claims of a secret nuclear test. So our mission today is pretty clear. We're going to carefully walk through all the sources we got, everything from official scientific reports, the real bedrock stuff, right up to the wilder currents of social media chatter. We want to figure out what really happened. And maybe more importantly, how you can separate the solid facts from, well, the fiction that just sounds convincing.
Yeah, it's absolutely critical to cut through that noise, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially when things are tense geopolitically. One rumor can just zip around the globe in seconds. So this deep dive, it's about giving you, the listener, a clear, evidence-based picture of this specific event. And we've pulled from a really wide range of sources here. We've got the big news outlets like the New York Times, news.com.au, then the scientific bodies, USGS, EMSC, GFCA, and of course the gold standard for nuclear monitoring, the CPBTO. And yes, we also looked at those social media posts, the ones that really fanned the flames of speculation. It's quite a mix.
Right, a real mosaic, as you said. Okay, let's unpack this then. Before we get lost in the speculation side, let's just nail down the confirmed details, the undisputed facts about the event itself. So we're talking about an earthquake in Iran, June 20th, 2025. The time was 9:19 p.m. local Iran time, magnitude 5.1. And the location, about 22 miles southwest of Semnan, Iran.
Mm-hmm. And the depth is key too.
Right, the depth, about 35 kilometers below the surface. Pretty deep. And the big agencies, USGS, EMSC, the German one, GFZ, they all basically agreed on these numbers. Sites like volcanodiscovery.com reported it just like that, a standard natural seismic event.
Exactly. And what's fascinating, or maybe just important context here, is that Iran sits squarely on several major fault lines. Earthquakes are, well, they're pretty common there. It's just the geology of the place.
Yeah.
So this initial data, the 5.1 magnitude, that 35-kilometer depth, it fits perfectly with the usual tectonic activity we see.
Okay, so 5.1 isn't tiny, but at that depth.
Right. At 35 kilometers down, a lot of the energy dissipates before it hits the surface. So it was felt, sure, but reports mentioned just light vibration in the area.
Yeah.
Critically, it was very unlikely to cause significant damage, which again points straight towards a natural quake. Nothing in that initial scientific readout screamed unusual or suspicious.
Okay, so far so geological. But here's where it takes that sharp turn, right? Despite these straightforward reports, the internet just lit up. Speculation about a nuclear test. Why? Why did so many people jump to that conclusion when the initial data seemed, well, normal?
Well, as you saw in the sources provided, those claims, they really blew up on social media,
Yeah.
especially X, formerly Twitter. We saw specific examples, right? That post from @InteractStore on June 20th, they questioned if this 5.2 magnitude quake they had, the number slightly different, was actually a nuke test, even linked it to something from the year before.
Okay, so immediate suspicion there.
Yeah. And the next day, June 21st, Adam Persky posted something even more specific, claiming unusual P waves, wave symmetry.
Ah, the technical sounding stuff.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
based on that, suggested a nuclear test. Even estimated Iran might have built like 10 warheads, a huge leap,
God.
from a reported natural tremor to suddenly estimating arsenal size.
Wow. Okay, so why does that kind of claim gain traction so fast?
Well, you can probably guess. It taps right into the existing controversies. Iran's nuclear program, the history there, the ongoing geopolitical tensions, especially with Israel. It's all background noise that's easily amplified. So when an earthquake happens in that context, particularly near sensitive areas perhaps, it immediately raises flags for some people, regardless of the science.
And that mention of P waves, wave symmetry, it sounds convincing if you don't know seismology, I suppose.
It does. It sounds very technical, very authoritative. But what they're referring to is actually a key way scientists do differentiate. See, an earthquake from a fault slipping generates both P waves. Those are the faster primary compressional waves and S waves, the slower secondary shear waves. They arrive in a specific pattern and ratio. An explosion, on the other hand, is different. It's more like a sudden outward push from a single point.
So more symmetrical.
Generally, yes. The energy radiates out more uniformly, creating a different wave pattern, particularly in the ratio and strength of P versus S waves, compared to a natural quake's complex rupture. So the claim was essentially that the detected waves looked too symmetrical for a natural event, which, raises the big question for us. How do we reliably tell the difference, especially when the online chatter gets so loud?
Right. So how do we cut through that? How do we get past the social media static and look at the hard evidence or lack
Well,
thereof?
we go straight to the official channels and the established scientific process. First off, look at the mainstream news coverage again.
Mm.
Reputable outlets, the ones we mentioned, like news.com.au, the New York Times, they confirm the earthquake details, magnitude, location, time. But did they mention any nuclear test connection?
No, I didn't see any reference to that in their main reports. They focused on the quake itself, maybe placed it in the context of regional tensions, but not a test.
Exactly. And that absence is significant. If there were any credible official concerns, any alerts from monitoring bodies, those outlets would likely have reported it. Their silence on the nuclear angle is telling.
Okay, so that's one piece. What about the bodies specifically looking for nuclear tests?
That's the crucial part. We look at the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, the CTBTO, and the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. These are the global watchdogs. Their entire job is detecting and verifying nuclear explosions. And for this June 20th, 2025 event, they have issued precisely 0 statements suggesting it was a nuclear test. Nothing.
And the CTBTO, they have pretty sophisticated ways of detecting things, right? It's not just seismometers.
Oh, absolutely. Their international monitoring system is incredible. It's a global network. They use seismic stations for ground vibrations, yes, but also hydroacoustic stations listening underwater, infrasound stations, listening for ultra-low frequency sound waves in the atmosphere, and radionuclide stations that literally sniff the air for radioactive particles, the telltale sign of a nuclear explosion. They are designed to pick up even very small nuclear tests anywhere. They are constantly listening, constantly analyzing.
So if something had happened,
They would almost certainly know. And typically, they would report or investigate if data looked anomalous. Their silence here is very strong evidence against the test hypothesis.
and didn't something similar happen before? You mentioned the comparison to a previous event.
Yes, exactly. Let's look back at October 5th, 2024. There was another earthquake in Iran, smaller, magnitude 4.5. And back then, same thing. Social media lit up with nuclear test claims. But in that case, the CTBTO did issue a statement. They analyzed data from over 25 of their monitoring stations and explicitly confirmed that the seismic signatures were consistent with a natural earthquake, not a nuclear test.
Okay, so they actively debunked it last time using their data.
Precisely. They looked at those specific wave patterns, the P waves, JCF characteristics we talked about, and what they found was consistent with something called a reverse fault.
A reverse fault, what does that mean in simple terms?
Think of tectonic plates pushing together. A reverse fault happens when one block of the Earth's crust is basically pushed up and over another block. It's a common type of faulting in areas where plates are colliding, like in Iran. And the seismic waves it generates have a very distinct signature, very different from the simple outward blast of an explosion.
So it's a known earthquake mechanism.
A very well-understood earthquake mechanism. And adding to that, there was a study. Johns Hopkins University published research in February 2025 that specifically analyzed and debunked those October 2024 nuclear test claims. They confirmed the seismic data showed the characteristic reverse fault signature, typical tectonic activity, not an explosion.
That's pretty solid scientific pushback against the earlier claims.
It is. It shows the system works, the analysis can differentiate.
And it's interesting you mentioned that even on X there were some counterposts this time too, like at @NC.
Yes, that's right. Amidst all the speculation, there were voices pointing out the lack of official evidence. That account at NC noted it was likely natural, specifically citing that there was no confirmation from CTBTO or IAEA. So you do see a mix on social media itself. But the sensational claim often travels faster and wider, doesn't it?
It certainly seems that way. Which brings us back to that pattern you mentioned. This isn't the first time we've seen this specific narrative pop up around an Iranian earthquake. Why does this keep happening? It feels predictable, almost.
It really does follow a pattern. The June 2025 speculation, it's almost a mirror image of the October 2024 situation. In both cases you had an earthquake in Iran, immediate social media buzz linking it to nuclear tests, often fueled by proximity to known nuclear sites or just general suspicion. And in both cases, official scientific consensus, backed by monitoring bodies like CTBTO and detailed analysis reported by groups like the Arms Control Association, confirming natural seismic events.
So the lack of official validation is consistent.
Very consistent. The pattern strongly suggests the June 2025 speculation is just the latest iteration, following the same script, and ultimately lacking foundation in evidence. It shows how potent the mix of a real event, like an earthquake, combined with pre-existing geopolitical anxieties can be. It creates fertile ground for these rumors.
And we should probably touch on that geopolitical context directly, shouldn't we? Because the timing, June 2025, it did coincide with a period of pretty high tension between Israel and Iran. CNN and others were reporting on missile strikes, diplomatic friction.
Absolutely. The context is important because it explains why the speculation might gain traction so easily. It provides a backdrop that makes the extraordinary claim seem, perhaps, slightly more plausible to some. It's a volatile situation in the region, no doubt.
And this seems like the crucial point, based on the sources, while that context might fuel the speculation.
There's zero direct evidence presented in any of the reliable sources linking this specific earthquake to military actions or nuclear tests. That link is purely speculative. The New York Times, for instance, they did report on other incidents, actual explosions in the region that were felt like earthquakes, but those were acknowledged military actions, completely separate events, not related to this deep, natural seismic signature from June 20th.
Right. So it's vital to differentiate between unrelated military events and this specific geological one.
Critically important. Lumping them together feeds the misinformation.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. What's the bottom line here for you, the listener? You're navigating this information landscape, hearing these competing narratives.
Yeah.
How do you make sense of it?
Well, the core finding, I think, is pretty clear from the evidence we've reviewed. The overwhelming weight of evidence points to the June 20th, 2025 earthquake being a natural tectonic event. Full stop. It fits Iran's known geology, its position on active fault lines. Earthquakes like this are expected there.
And the lack of official flags.
That's key. The complete silence from global nuclear monitoring bodies like the CTBTO and IAEA is deafening in a good way. Combine that with the consistent scientific analysis methods and the clear history of similar claims being debunked just months before. It all strongly indicates the nuclear test speculation around this event is, well, unfounded. It's speculation without basis in verifiable data.
So the big takeaway seems to be wary of social media storms. While those rumors can spread like wildfire and sound very dramatic, they often lack real scientific backing. When you're dealing with sensitive topics, especially with geopolitical angles, sticking to official, credible scientific sources is just essential for accuracy.
Absolutely. Don't just take the loudest voice or the most sensational claim at face value. Do that extra step of checking against authoritative sources.
It's about being critically minded, isn't it? Especially with information flying at us from all directions, often unverified. Always seek out multiple, credible viewpoints.
And maybe a final thought to leave with you, the listener. Just consider how quickly and easily this kind of speculation spread, how it tapped into those existing fears and tensions. What other areas of public discussion, beyond earthquakes and nuclear politics, might be similarly swayed by claims that feel right, but aren't actually backed by solid evidence? How can you, as someone trying to stay informed, get better at spotting those? It's a skill we all need, really.
That's a really important point, something to definitely chew on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We really hope it helped clarify things. We invite you to keep exploring complex topics with us, always with curiosity and that critical eye. We'll see you next time.